Hi, everybody. How's it going? Michelle, how are you?
Yeah, awesome. Finished a late dinner. Feeling super great.
Nice. What did you have?
I did pork chops, pasta for me, rice for the girlfriend because she's gluten free, and vegetables.
Nice. Uzi, how are you?
Doing well. Just took my dog out for a walk. Second space of the day. It's exciting.
Let's go. What kind of dog do you have?
I got a Yorkie Dachshund, so he's like a wiener dog and a Yorkie combined, basically.
Oh, cool. If there's anybody on YouTube, if you're on YouTube, please let me know how the audio quality is in the comments. The comments are open to everybody. I'm gonna put a link to the YouTube video in the replies as well. Robert, how are you?
Doing great.
Oh
Just got my
wow,
Tesla clean.
nice. That's awesome. Um, the link to the YouTube video is at the top of our screens. Galileo says audio good. Michelle says audio good. Perfect. Great, man. This might be the smoothest start ever to any of our spaces. Getting second nature now. Martin says good. Perfect. Robert, have you watched this interview of Brad Adcock?
Yes. Not with Brad. No, sorry. I
Yeah,
watched the one with the One X Tech robotic company.
I didn't watch that one, so that's perfect. That's great.
Awesome.
But let's talk about this Brad one because I just watched it and I took some notes. Uzi, what did you think? You watched it, right?
Unfortunately, I didn't have time to today. My fantasy football draft, so it was a very big day for me.
Oh yeah. Who's your quarterback?
Dak Prescott.
All right. Well, good luck to you. Michelle, did you watch it? The Brad Adcock interview of Figure AI?
No, I've been cooking, and I mean food and AI stuff more than absorbing. Sometimes you absorb and listen to lots of interviews and talk shows, and sometimes you create. You switch in between the two, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. So I took a bunch of notes. I can just read them. So give me 1 second. Okay. Oh, Omar's here. Perfect. All right. So in this Figure AI, Brad Adcock said they're manufacturing one robot a week. The Figure AI is manufacturing one robot a week right now. Uh, hold on. Michelle, how is the audio on YouTube?
I'll go double check.
Omar, how are you?
I'll go double check.
Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
Good, good. I just watched this Brad Adcock interview. So let's start with.
He's like, yeah, we need more really real competitors. Tesla's like really real. I'm like, okay. And then he goes, yeah, I love Tesla. I got 3 Teslas. Best cars ever. It's like, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. He's a Tesla fan. He's an Elon fan. But like you mentioned in the TSLA live today, the other guy was a um, the other guy was a what was his name? Trevor Milton was also an Elon fan at first, right?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of like Brett in the sense that he was a fan, but then also saying we're going to one up him.
Yeah, exactly. More competitors, the better. Kind of the same rhetoric. I'm not saying he's a fraud or anything like that, but
I
so
don't
here's
think
the
he's a
yeah
fraud.
yeah here are the notes I took. So Figure AI is manufacturing one robot a week. They have about 10 robots at this point. From Figure 1 to Figure 2, They tripled GPU and CPU on board, and they doubled battery capacity to 2.3 kilowatt hours. All wires are internal, he said. They have 6 onboard cameras on the head, in the back, and lower torso. Figure AI has about 100 engineers today. They went on to 4th generation hands, much improved, and he counted all the ways that it's improved, and it seems like, in every way it's improved. Like you mentioned, he owns 3 Teslas. Big Elon fan, believes that Tesla is moving in the right direction, going to be a real competitor. Like you said, he said they need more real competitors in the robotics industry. Their goal is to get costs down by 10x. There's about roughly 1,000 parts, and he believes when they reach very high volume, the ultimate cost of production per unit is going to be less than $20,000. He believes that there will be 10 billion robots by 2040. He highlighted that humanoids will integrate into the world easily without new infrastructure needed, as opposed to, say, cars where you need charging stations, service stations, etc. He believes that goods service prices will trend down to zero in the limits. They raised about $675 million at $2.6 billion valuation. He said they have more cash than needed at this point. They signed a deal. They did a test with BMW. The next step with BMW is to have their robots continuously working on the production line. He put about $100 million of his own money, and he believes deal with OpenAI is a big deal. To achieve AGI, they're going to need embodied AI, according to Sam Altman, and this would be a good way to increase data collected. Robert is loving. Robert, did you watch it? Did you not watch it?
I didn't watch this interview. I'm very fascinated.
Yeah. He believes that there are single-digit years to become a real company. They have to get this figured out. Basically, he says from a few robots to scaling up to thousands, tens of thousands of robots. They have to do this within the single-digit years. For them, 70 to 80% of the robot is designed and built in-house. We talked in TSLI Live today. Omar mentioned his comments around how they do AI in-house, but Omar said it's not really as big a deal that they say it is, but maybe he can elaborate on that some more. He said that Figure AI will not do anything defense related. Apparently it's in their motto. They don't want to do anything with defense related or police or anything like that. He believes that humanoids in homes definitely in 3 years. Humanoids in homes definitely in 3 years. And they have he believes that it's going to be, their humanoids are maybe 2 or 3 will be coming off the production line next year. Hundreds at first, then thousands. And that's what they're trying to figure out. But ultimately, obviously, you're going to have to ramp it up to millions for it to be meaningful. But it looks like several years out. Robert, let's start with you. What do you think about these comments so far? And then maybe Omar can chime in
I
as
was
well.
interested in the number of parts. That sounds very high compared to other efforts, like K-Scale, which is a Y Combinator company in Palo Alto. They 3D printed their own robot and used standard electric motors. Now they don't have the hands. Okay, so you got to throw 50 parts in just for the hands. But I'm wondering why they have 1,000 parts. And the 1x.tech robot has far less battery and claims that their robot can go 2 to 8 hours of work, maybe longer, because they're actually really efficient. And you said there's a lot of battery in this robot, and I'm wondering why theirs is inefficient where the 1x.tech is so efficient.
Yeah.
I think these are really plus. We need to know, we need to have all 3 next to each other so that we can test them and evaluate how good they are at doing various tasks like folding laundry, loading dishwashers, stuff like that. and they're a ways away still.
Yep, okay, let's go to Sharon, Uzi, then Omar.
Well, hey everyone. I want to say hi to everybody. Well, I'm wondering affordability. I mean, how affordable, and what Robert just said is very important. I mean, how useful and how affordable will they be for the public? That would be interesting for me to know.
Yeah, so
one
at the beginning,
yes.
I went through my notes of Brad Adcock's interview, and he said when they reach high volume and they did an analysis of all the 1,000 parts they have, he believes they can get to sub 20,000 production cost per unit. And a couple sentences before that, he mentioned their goal is to get costs down by 10x. I mean, at this stage, every robot is obviously costing them $1 million plus. And when they get to production up and running next year or the year after, it's going to be maybe hundreds of thousands per unit. And you're going to have to achieve high volume to get to sub 20,000, just like in cars, Uzi and then Omar.
I think with the 1X company, it wasn't their first bot either. Whereas for Figure, I think this is their first, right? Scoble?
The 1X company had a robot that rolled around on wheels before the one that they just showed off a couple days ago.
Yeah, and they said they were using, I don't know, data or like learnings from that.
Yes, and that makes sense. But I don't know anybody who has one in their house, so it's still early R&D efforts. I watched it clean up a mess that somebody spilled some coffee on purpose on a table, and then told the robot, "Can you clean it up?" And it cleaned it up, but it was real rough. It wasn't confident. It wasn't smooth, right? It's sort of like FSD before, like the last version.
Omar, what did you think of those comments?
Which comments specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I
Just
read a
everything you
bunch,
said?
but yeah,
Everything?
yeah.
Well, I mean, I agree with him that humanoids are going to be a huge market. I mean, I kind of see it as like the dawn of the personal computer. It's that level of big that we see coming. So this is like us in the 70s right now, going like, "Oh, we got these computers, they're $20,000, a few companies have them." But we can see that it's going to become a major industrial applications are emerging, and consumer applications are not too far down the line, especially with the way that AI models are evolving. So there's certainly a market there. They've raised some money. They've got an office in the Bay Area. They're taking some good steps there, but everybody and their mom is trying to make a humanoid robot. As Adcock mentioned himself, creating a robot that's low cost, but also super durable, also super reliable, weatherproof, can be made in large quantities. You can find all the things you need, either developing them internally or supplying them at high enough volumes. You got the software, and you're better than everybody else. You're better than Boston Dynamics, who's been doing this since forever. You're better than Tesla, company that's got hundreds of thousands of GPUs. You're better than some Chinese company in Shenzhen, which has the greatest electronic supply chain on earth. So it all sounds good. I think this is a real market. It's a market I'm watching closely. I just haven't been convinced yet that Figure is going to be one of the dominant players. They do seem to be good at marketing, but I mean, the guy just doesn't have an experience of putting out products like this. I don't think people realize how hard it is to put out a physical product like this that has to be used in the real world. His last startup, the self-driving car startup, which, he got pushed out of the company for some reason, there's still no cars flying. So, they went public, they took public funds, and I'm not necessarily sure we're necessarily going to see a success here too. It's a very, very difficult market. They certainly have a shot. They're certainly a company I'm watching. But then, he said, Peter Diamandis said, "Hey, let's go check out the Figure 2." He's like, "All right, let's see if somebody's using it." that doesn't sound like they're making one a week. That sounds like they've got one, right? So, and then he's like, okay, and then we're doing designs for the Figure 3. It's like, man, you haven't even released a single product yet, and you're already on the Figure 1, the Figure 2, and the Figure 3. Like, which figure am I actually going to buy? The Figure 69? So, they're a company I watch. I think just, you get some engineers together, you work on this. There's a lot of things going in the favor, and investments from Microsoft, OpenAI, others. That's certainly all, great sign. But if I were to make a ranking of the top 3 companies in humanoid robotics, number 1 would probably be Tesla, just given the strength of their FSD software. Its ability to adapt to open-ended environments and move through them is like nothing else I've ever seen in computer vision. So that kind of puts Tesla at number 1. Because remember, anyone can figure out how to make the robot hardware eventually. It's well studied. But
And it's the company that proved that they
the
can make
software is the
things at
biggest
volume.
piece. And then number 2 would probably be Boston Dynamics, and number 3 would probably be a Chinese company.
Interesting. Okay. Let's go to Meta Prime, then Sharon.
Yeah, I just want to kind of mirror what Mars is saying there. I think he makes a really good point that Tesla is just really ahead of the curve when it comes to vision. And this is something that I think was overlooked a lot when it came to the whole self-driving element with Tesla. Is you have like Google, these other companies, and a lot of this is just how much training data do you have? And Tesla's just so far ahead of the game when it comes to training data. I think that there's a lot of value from doing multiple different projects. Right, they're running Grok. He also made the point like they've got all this compute power. Right? They are just. I think it's going to be really hard to beat Tesla and anyone who's trying to get into the space. Like the reason that Elon can jump so far ahead in robotics, even though it's not really been his mainstay. It's just all of the skill set and data and all the other overlapping things. Those are very relevant to what he's doing, and so he already kind of has that advantage. But I thought Mars had some really good points there. I just wanted to echo that.
Thank you, Michelle. How is the audio on YouTube?
That's perfect. It's transcribing pretty well as well, which I'm doing right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Sharon, then Robert.
I wanted to ask you, did you share your YouTube with us yet? Do you have it on your timeline?
Yeah, it's at the top of your screens in the nest.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking, with these robots training data, I think the first series is definitely not going to be good. I bet. They have to be put into real world, into different households, and then I think training data will probably be updated. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I'm guessing that that's how it's going to be. That they're probably going to be awful. The first series of robots.
This is true of all AI systems. They always start awful. They can't beat a child at the game of Go, and they keep improving until they beat the best human at the game of Go, right? And same is going to be true in robots. Here's some examples. The cleanup of a mess on a table is really rough right now. It looks like a robot. It should look like a human. Now, I haven't seen the newest one do that same task. I want to see the new one because the new one has a new stack and it's much, much better. You saw that in the videos, right? I want to see it actually work. I want to see it in somebody's house, right? It also had to be told to clean up the mess. Around the time when we get it so-called AGI, the robot's going to figure it out on its own and go, oh, there's a new mess. I'm going to clean it up. And that's probably version 2, i.e. around 2028, right? Certainly by 2030, we're in a new world where a lot of us have robots in our homes, or particularly our businesses.
Uzi.
I think with the teleoperation as it's currently going, basically what that means is people have meta quests and they're acting out the action they want the humanoid to perform. That doesn't fundamentally scale. You have a certain amount of bodies. So to Sharon's credit, having a humanoid in the household and seeing like a diversity of situations or a diversity of or observing from human behavior as well, I think that's what will really accelerate the learning. But I do assume, I think most of us assume Optimus and other humanoids will be in factories first before they're, around children or
The
anything like that.
1X tech company is
Shut,
not going
Robert.
after
Sorry, we have
factories.
Robert. When we have hands up, we're going to go by the hands. Sharon, then Scott.
Yeah, the AGI thing, I mean, is it solved till then? Probably not. Is that what's going to lead to AGI if we get all that training data from robots that are moving around in the real world?
Scott.
Yeah, so I actually was loving what the 1X was doing recently, and I watched the entire S3 YouTube video yesterday, hour and a half. It's fantabulous, and I think there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of value, not so much just in the AI, but in the product that's going to deliver the AI in the real world, specific to what Sharon was speaking of, in our home, bumping with us, tripping over us, and I am just fascinated by that particular product. And on top of Optimus, obviously, I just think they have an approach that is so fundamentally different than anything I've heard that it's kind of like Tesla to me. It just draws me in right now.
Yes. The durability question that came up earlier, the 3D printers that are on the market now can print out carbon fiber material that's really, really lightweight. And I banged on it with a hammer and didn't even leave a scratch in the material. And this leads to a new safety thing that I asked the CEO of 1X on his Twitter space. What if it collides with you let's say it's moving as fast as it possibly can down a hall to go get something, and you're running and you collide? What would happen? He said about the same as if a human hit you at that speed. But they're really working on making sure that it's safe with people. And that's what's going to take to get it into the home. Because if I have one
Okay.
in my house and it hurts me, I'm going to tell you all.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
Hey, Omar, can you elaborate on what you mentioned in the TSLA live today about, how Brad Adcock talks about they do AI in-house, but you mentioned anybody can pull API from OpenAI. It's not as difficult as he's making it out to be. How does it compare? How does what Figure AI is doing compare to what Tesla is doing in terms of AI, building AI?
Well, just in terms of the demo video they made, it's nothing that anybody with the OpenAI API can't do. Now, whether they pursue a deeper integration in the future, we'll have to see. But there's a difference between showing something that looks impressive to an average person, like, oh wow, it's got OpenAI, and actually making something that works. So, OpenAI's got great models, of course, but the robot needs its own models that run on the robot itself, because you can't have everything going over the internet. The internet's unreliable. Sometimes you got that Wi-Fi dead zone in your house, right? Sometimes you got that area where signal won't go. Even Starlink needs a direct connection to the sky. So maybe we'll have some amazing network technology in the future. Today, networks are unreliable. This is why you can't remotely drive a car. So the robot really needs models that run on the device that handle things like perception, natural language understanding, uh, proprioception, and planning and control. And they're going to have to do that themselves and train their own models to do that. So that's what it is ultimately going to come down to for whether the product is successful. Everybody's robot is eventually going to converge to a hardware design that performs similarly. The differentiator is going to be how reliable is the robot? How easy is it to use? When you ask it to get it a cup of tea, how often does it drop the cup of tea? How often does it spill the tea on your lap? And how often does it just, carefully hand you that cup? And you know, they're a player for sure. We're talking about them now, but you got to kind of prove it. Actually, kind of demonstrate that this works. And a demo video is one thing. When you're recording a video, you can cut and you can try it again. Actually, having it in someone's home and working every time is a different story. So, you know, honestly, I'm looking at the One X, and they're kind of interesting company too. Maybe even making more progress than Figure is. One interesting thing about the One X video, which is a pretty short video that went viral, and they got some ex Tesla people there too, is that they had the robot wear clothes. It's kind of an interesting sort of design choice. The robot's wearing some kind of outfit, you know, so it does kind of make it look more human in a sense compared to just seeing its raw joints exposed and everything like that. So that's going to be an interesting sort of design space too. Do you want a humanoid robot that's wearing clothes? Do you want to dress your robot? Like that could probably be a huge revenue line, is just clothes for your robot, right? Dress your robot up, whatever. Like how Apple makes so much money selling Apple Watch bands. But then on the other hand, some people might think it's creepy. Maybe you just want your robot to be naked. You don't want people to get confused and think it's a human. You don't want your kid to think it's their mom or something. But it is kind of an interesting question. Should robots have clothes? My guess is they probably will have some type of clothes in some cases, but then there will be other robots that are more functional that don't.
Michelle, are you gonna dress up your robot?
Well, I mean, I think they should right now dress up their robot because everybody's looking on 4K, printing every frame, and like these Chinese manufacturers, they probably are looking at these with even a more attentive eye than we us fans, and they're gonna try and replicate. So, as like some were out there making demos of their robots, and then you see months later people copying their ideas, their actuator placements, and all of that. It's fun when they share, but I think they're gonna keep their secret sauce close to their chest, and we're gonna see some sort of cover on robots going forward.
Robert?
Yeah, that's their claim, that they're using clothes to keep their intellectual property private. They don't want the competition to understand how they're making their robot. There's another component to this, and it's fun. I mean, I see a day where I'm gonna get a Star Trek clothing kit for my robot, put it on, and then all of a sudden my robot starts behaving like Data, right?
Yeah, one
And I think the
possibility could be
fun,
simply that the robot's just a total mess inside with wires going all over the place. They
it
scrambled to get it ready at the
guaranteed,
last minute. They said, "Hey, throw an outfit on this guy." And no one will be able to
guaranteed.
see. Or it could be that they just wanted to hide their work so that, as to the other person's point, some Chinese manufacturer doesn't copy it and make it cheaper and better.
Omar, why did you say they might be ahead of Figure AI, this One X robot?
Just based off the demos I've seen, the movements it's making, um, you know, the more natural movements, that type of thing. Some of the other videos I've seen from the company, it's hard to know for sure. I can't judge who's ahead just by looking at some demo videos. But just based
I,
off the demos that I've seen, it does seem to be more natural.
I like their openness too. They're pretty open about where they are, and they invited me over to see what they're doing. So that speaks volumes to me. And I think the more people who get tours of the labs, the more of a complete picture we'll get of where these projects are. Because it's about to go next level. It's very clear to me that we're getting a robot that we can talk to that's going to do shit for us.
So are you gonna go?
Oh, I went. I already visited them. I'm working with them to try to get one of the first robots in my house.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah, some of that was covered. I think that the robot technology, the in-home robot technology, is actually much closer than we think, and 1X is definitely advancing that. And I think a lot of the people here that are probably like me, pro Tesla, pro first principle engineering, are going to appreciate what they're bringing to the table. Specifically, acknowledging things like engineering processes for large scale manufacturing. They started with a specific thing, which was motivation, the motor, created something that was one off and their own thing and could do the torque necessary out of the work they could put into it. And then they've developed over time systems just like Elon does that everybody says can't work, won't work. And that's why a lot of that stuff's blurred, and they even explain in the longer video on S3 that was just dropped yesterday. And I'm not a fan. Like, I have no investment in this. This is just like so fascinating. Scott W brought it up, and I've just like been learning. So they put the outer squishy layer on it to make it more compliant in our crash filled world. Our whole world is consisting of just crashing into stuff. We crash when we walk and when we open stuff, and they talk about that and opening doors and not repeating simple things more than 50 times to grasp it, as if you tell it, go open my refrigerator, and their goal is to make sure that robot can open your refrigerator in your house in less than 50 times, right? And just so many of the things that the CEO um, espoused and is able to communicate very, very concisely in a second language, and fundamentally, um, I guess, explain things that I didn't understand about robotics and integration in real world, not industrial, is fantastic. So I
Thank you,
think it's awesome.
Robert.
I'm going to judge it. How fast does it learn my wife's cooking? Standing next to her, does it learn it in one session, or does it take a couple to get it right? It already recognizes her soup off ChatGPT does, at least. You take a picture of her Iranian soup, and it tells you everything about the soup. Tells you like what its cultural background is, what's in the soup, but all sorts of things. So the AIs, the LLMs already know food at a very deep level, and I'm expecting the robot to make dinner and make it the way you like it, i.e., you show it how to do something one time, it should do whatever dish you want over and over and over exactly the same way. Right?
Uzi.
Well, I think making a dish, you have a recipe, so that's a pretty simple formula for uh, a humanoid to pull off. I think the complicated situations where they're not, there's many ways to pull off the same thing. That's like picking, maybe not picking up an egg, but picking and placing a large object. Well, maybe not large, small, like a medium-sized object, like a kid. That would be interesting to me. But food is procedural, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Omar, question for you. So obviously Figure AI is partnered with OpenAI. This gave them a lot of credibility. And GPT-5 is going to come out sometime in the next few months. GPT-4o right now is at the top of the leaderboard at Hugging Face. Do you think how Grok compares to GPT-5 is going to be a determinant factor in which humanoid is more useful in the next few years?
Well, what you're seeing in the LLM world today is that OpenAI still has the best models, but not really by much. So there's a lot of models now that do pretty much what ChatGPT can do. Like even Llama 3, for example, which is completely free, anyone can use that. And the largest version, the 405 billion parameter version, it's almost as good as ChatGPT. And you can download it and use it for free. Then you got Claude by Anthropic. Some people say Claude is actually better than OpenAI at specific things, like, for example, coding. And then you've got models like Grok, which have access to real time data on X. They are now surpassing some of the older versions of GPT 4.0. And they just brought up one of the largest, or sorry, according to them, the largest compute cluster in the world. You project this out further, and the lead is small today, and it's already getting smaller. So I'd say that really the LLM models that people have are almost as good as OpenAI. And how OpenAI trains their models is not really a secret. Everybody kind of knows how it's done. They were kind of open for quite a while. They're not so open anymore. So that all makes a big difference. Now, the big question is, what does OpenAI have that they're not showing us, right? Do they have some massive leap forward that we haven't seen yet? And so everybody's talking about the new Strawberry model, which used to be called QStar. And this new model is said to have much more powerful reasoning abilities, next level, right? They're showing it to the Department of Defense. That's how good it is. We got to show it to the Department of Defense like it's some kind of nuclear bomb they've created. Part of this may just be marketing, but what is Project Strawberry? So, what are the capabilities of it? A lot of speculation about this. That could be the thing that actually makes OpenAI have a much bigger lead than it looks like on the leaderboards today. But we don't know too much detail that's officially confirmed about that next gen model.
Robert?
Grok caught up big time. I think Omar's exactly right on. That Grok is learning faster than the other AIs right now. The co-founder of Siri, Tom Gruber, told me, pay attention in AIs. You should pay attention to the rate of learning. How fast is it learning? That's why Omar and I are so excited about FSD, because we can see every update that comes out. It's a massive improvement in quality, right? So how many more jumps like that do you need before you get to almost perfect? Not many. And same thing is going to be true on robots. It's going to be a fun thing to watch. The models are about to go crazy. The next 18 months is going to be fucking insane for human beings.
Yeah. I don't know, Robert. You said, like, I listened extremely carefully to what you said in the last few sentences.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of vague terms. Like, you're not putting any specifics. Like, for example, you said something like, how many jumps like that do you need before it gets it perfect? The definition of perfect, like, are you saying 100% accuracy? I'm going to put you on mute. Sorry, you have to stay on mute when you're not talking. I know it's very difficult. I know you're very passionate about the topic, and I appreciate your opinion. I want it in space, but you have to stay on mute. So when you say something like, how many jumps do you need? Not many. Well, how many? And what do you mean by jump? And what do you mean by perfect? Like, those are all, they need specifics to be material, I think. Go ahead.
The founder of Pixar told me that in the 1960s, he knew a digital film was possible. He needed Moore's Law, he told me, to flip 32 times before Toy Story was possible. We're a lot closer than that to getting really amazing robots, virtual beings, augmented autonomous vehicles, right? That's a lot of change for human beings. We're seeing that in the streets of San Francisco. I mean, Omar, how many autonomous cars do you see in a minute? Dozens, right? And sometimes.
Yeah, they're all over the place now. and from multiple different companies.
Meta?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more on the skeptical side of the speed of AI. I mean, I agree with Robert that there's a lot of really exciting things to come, but also at the same time, I think the reason that people have been able to catch up on AI innovation is because there are plateaus in this innovation cycle. Like there are limits to AI, and I see videos of these people all the time online of doom and gloom, and AI is just going to completely destroy and change everything, blah blah blah. And to me, I mean, I respect that. I think you can't not just kind of hope, stick your head in the sand and hope that it all works out. But I do think that a lot of that is hype. Right? I mean, there was tons of people who are slapping AI on every single startup, and bid for venture capital over the last couple of years, and not a lot came from that. And now we're getting to the point where I think people are kind of seeing, there are a lot of applications where AI isn't going to work as quickly as they thought, or it doesn't work, or there's limitations, and there's also always going to be a demand for interacting with real people, and there's always going to be social limitations around how quickly people are willing to give up control and agency of driving a car to an AI. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think that the future of AI is, there's a lot to be excited for, but at the same time, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself and kind of expecting like giant shifts right away. I think there are plateaus here that we probably aren't seeing as readily in the mainstream.
Robert?
I don't get where you're coming from. I just went to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., walked around taking pictures of everything I can find, and it knew everything in the Smithsonian. That's dramatically important for human beings. It knows everything about everything now from a photo. How do you say that we've hit a plateau? We didn't have that 12 months ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a video that was making the rounds not so long ago about how, regardless of how much compute you pour into training a system, there is this inherent limit of speed of which the system can be trained, right? It's like, and so I would say that there's things like that. I mean, certainly there's a lot of these applications that are very cool, and there's going to be a lot of power in that. But at the same time, I guess I'm just trying to not get too ahead of ourselves and kind of saying that anything is possible with AI. I think that there are going to be plateaus and limitations, right? Like so for example, you have that like the strawberry thing where it can't tell how many R's are in the word strawberry, right? And that might not be a problem of like we need to throw more training data at this. That might be an inherent problem with how we're training, right? And until there's a shift, like maybe you look at like quantum computing or something like that, that's not going to change, right? That there's just limitations like that in the model is kind of what I'm getting at here.
Robert, and then Uzi.
It's called a large language model. If you're going to be a technical person building things in the modern world, use the right tool for the right job. Asking how many R's are in a strawberry is a counting job. That's not what a large language model does really well. You're going to see soon orchestras of models that do various things well, right? Including checking each other's answers.
Uzi.
By the point humanoids are capable enough to like replace human jobs, though, I think they'll become politicized. So, there's a long way for them to become capable and competent at scale. And then even when they are, I think the human element, or even like labor in general, is going to politicize humanoid robots in at least around 5 years, in my opinion.
Okay, good. All right, we are halfway in the space. We have other news to talk about. For example, California Assembly passes controversial AI safety bill. We talked about this last Monday. on episode 4. Now we have new development on this front. The California Assembly has passed a bill aimed at regulating the development and use of AI systems. The bill includes provisions for mandatory risk assessments and transparency requirements for AI developers. However, it's also faced criticism for being overly broad and potentially hindering innovation. Omar, any comments on this?
Yeah. Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, it strikes me as potentially not something that is really going to be needed today with these types of risk assessments. At the same time, the way these models are evolving, maybe it'll be necessary in the future. So we'll have to see. I haven't dug into the details of the bill a bit. We'll probably be hearing a lot more about it now that it looks like it's going to become law. But there's probably a lot of stupid stuff in there and maybe a few good ideas as well.
Okay. Next item, Elon Musk. And we're going to circle back. I'm going to circle back with the speaker board on each of these. So just kind of keep in mind or jot down whatever thoughts you have on these items. Let's just kind of go through them, make sure we got them into the episode because these are the developments of this week. Next item, Elon Musk revives lawsuit against OpenAI and Sam Altman. Elon Musk has refiled a lawsuit against OpenAI and its CEO, Sam Altman, alleging that they misused Twitter data to train their AI models. The lawsuit seeks damages and an injunction to prevent further unauthorized use of Twitter data. Third, OpenAI co-founder Shulman leaves for Anthropic. Brockman takes extended leave. In a significant development within OpenAI, co-founder Ilya Shulman has departed to join rival AI company Anthropic. Additionally, OpenAI President Greg Brockman has announced an extended leave of absence.
Was this
Next-
generated by ChatGPT?
No, this is another. Why? Is it old?
Yeah.
Yeah. This one is old, but hold on 1 second. So I said, you know what? I actually want to check for that because this one did sound old, right? And then I said, please include the date of each news item. And for this one, it said August 26th to September 1st. This is Gemini. So how do you explain that?
Let me see. Greg Brockman leave. That happened on 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean, it's a weekly podcast, so we haven't talked about it before. That's fine. Interesting. So the date was off. All right.
Yeah, it is an interesting story.
Yeah, we'll circle back. Next, Cerebras versus NVIDIA. New inference tool promises higher performance. AI hardware startup Cerebras has introduced a new AI inference solution that claims to outperform NVIDIA's GPUs for enterprise applications. The Cerebras inference tool, based on their wafer scale engine, aims to deliver significant performance improvements for AI workloads. Did you hear about this one?
I've heard of Cerebras. They've been around for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. They're more focused on institutions, I think. But this is talking about inference tool, promising higher performance. Okay. And then the next one, Amazon partners with Anthropic to enhance Alexa. Amazon has announced a strategic collaboration with AI startup Anthropic to improve Alexa's capabilities. This partnership will leverage Anthropic's large language models to make Alexa more controversial and helpful. Okay.
More controversial or more conversational?
Conversational, my bad. Good job. Checking if you're listening. All right. Any comments on any one of these? Robert? Uzi?
I think on the California bill, there's something about California that reminds me of the European Union and their need to overregulate And I think it might be a dominant, not maybe a dominance thing, but it's their strategy for control over, I guess, obviously corporations, but how to do business at scale. And I think because California has a large tech scene, they can get away with it. Same with the EU having a large market. I do think this bill. I mean, I haven't read it. I think the specifics, or I think the overall gist of it is prescriptive, and because of that, it's not really examining the particular. I think it's more, just I'll end right there. I don't want to ramble.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, there's a whole group of venture capitalists and others who are up in arms about the bill. And then there's others on the other side who are like saying this is a great bill. So it's hard to figure it all out from watching the players. There needs to be some regulation because there is a lot of fear of AI amongst normal everyday people in my consumer research. Hatred even. And if you don't get a hold of that energy and say, hey, we've regulated this, and we've headed it off, you're going to see a political blowback. And I think that's what's going on is both sides are trying to figure out how to get ahead of the politics because politics are about to get ugly because people are very resistive to a lot of the ideas that we're talking about today. Normal people, not people listening here.
Meta.
Yeah, I mean, the bill is really interesting. Talked about this a few times before. I mean, it's not passed yet, right? It still have to get the signature from Gavin Newsom. And I think a lot of people that I've been talking to just look at it and they feel like this is just too limiting. It's going to cause too many problems. It's going to smother innovation. And they're kind of like, why would California do this when they got Silicon Valley? Too limiting. It's going to cause too many problems. It's going to smother innovation. And they're kind of like, why would California do this when they got Silicon Valley and they should really be taking care of that kind of golden goose? And there's a few developed regardless, and trying to hamstring it is just going to drive innovation to other places. But another thing is this with the whole politics. I mean, Gavin Newsom might make a big stand on this and then not sign it and have that be, some big element of kind of what he runs on. So I think it's really interesting, kind of where it's at and where it's going to go. I think it's definitely worth paying attention to because it's going to have a huge effect. A lot of companies tend to, or a lot of states tend to follow California in kind of the legislation they take around tech, and it's going to set a big precedent that's going to be very important to watch.
Uzi, did you have your hand up?
No.
Robert, anything else on any of the items? What I noticed is that people are really focused on the safety bill. Like I read 5 items and everyone's talking about the safety bill.
I think humans like conflict. It focuses us. And here there's clearly a conflict of two sides believing different things and making decisions that I can't really get involved in too much other than saying don't do it. But I see both sides,
I mean, can you maybe explain to us the side that says there should be less regulation of AI? Like, why would someone say, no, don't pass a safety bill?
Let's talk about autonomous cars. Humans kill 40,000 people in cars every year in America, 1 point something million people around the world every year. Tragedies. The autonomous car might start out at a higher rate, but I told you AI improves. So within 3 or 4 years, you're passing humans. And that's the problem. Can you release the autonomous car before you get to that part? Right. It's clear no. You can't kill anybody in an autonomous car. Humans can have 40,000 deaths. We don't care. We're used to that. The autonomous car comes along. No. You can't run over a kid. Can't hit somebody. That'll cause the whole thing to get shut down. Like in GM Cruise got shut down in San Francisco for a while.
Meta?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of make the argument for why, like we should be worried about, or we should, hesitant to enact AI safetyism, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I just think that there's a lot of countries out there. You think of China, right, who, regardless of what the U.S. does and limits that, or what even they, say they're going to limit to themselves, they're still going to move forward with innovation in that sphere. And or it's going to be some other country that knows, hey, look, like we can keep the laws pretty lax, and it, with technology like this, it's not like moving a factory, right? You do have your training, you have to have like the hardware to train these things off of, but even then you're not, it's a lot more movable than a lot of other things. And I think so it's kind of again, I think California is taking a big risk in running these limitations out. And it's also very nebulous, right? It's one of those things where, if you've read the language of the bill, there's a lot of things where they define harm, or they define these other terms, and you're kind of like, okay, what does that mean, and how are they going to apply it? And I think that's creates a really big problem, because especially if you're starting to see a more and more politicized legal system, who knows if the people in charge are going to use that law and apply it ubiquitously across everyone fairly, or if they're going to use it to go after people. I'm just not a big fan of what they've got there, and I expect to see much more controversy on this as things go forward.
We have a question that replies that says, this is a state bill. Will companies outside the state be able to innovate as they like? I mean, this is not just a state bill. This is a California bill,
No, according to several people I've read, California's rules apply to business done in the state, which is literally every tech company, right, has business inside California. So it's going to force the entire nation to comply with this ruling. So you're not going to be able to move your company to Texas and get around the rule. At least that's my understanding of reading a lot of people in the AI industry.
Scott? Scott? Archer?
No, I actually didn't have
Well,
specifics to what
you
he
gave
was
it a
saying.
thumbs down. Do you disagree?
No, I actually agreed with what he was saying. I disagreed with the policy.
Oh, I see. Robert, what do you say to Meta Prime's position that China will innovate as they like? They're not going to slow it down, and eventually we're going to lose if we get hung up on these safety bills.
I once met a guy who owns a factory that makes a lot of art in China, and he told me exactly that in China they can move a lot faster than in America. He said in China we just build a skyscraper. In America you argue about it for 10 years.
Okay, but do you think we're going to lose the race to China then?
Well, they were ahead in getting an everything app, weren't they? They forced their citizens to use the WeChat, and now WeChat is used by everybody for everything, right? Every transaction goes through WeChat now. We don't have a thing like that here in America. So they have a lot more data about transactions that are going on in Shanghai and Beijing than we do about what's going on in Los Angeles and New York. So yeah, they're ahead. I don't know how we catch up personally, but we're going to make a valiant effort of it.
Uzi.
I mean, also look at Kling
Man,
AI.
this is the most doom and gloom I've ever seen Robert, who is a very positive, very extremely positive person. Almost all the time, I have never seen him say, "You know what? We're behind."
They
Uzi,
have a lot of advantages, man.
would they?
Just
But
means we have a place to go. That's all.
Uzi.
Kling AI is Chinese, if I'm not mistaken. So I know there's Runway, which is pretty good. Kling is I didn't enjoy I enjoy my experience with it. But one thing I've learned about China and their government, if the CCP finds some industry valuable, I think one example is shipbuilding. They'll subsidize it to a loss because it fits their overall strategy. So I don't know if they're ahead per se, but their will to win is certainly there, especially with technology that they deem like national security.
You know, Uzi, I was watching a movie today called Swingers from 1996 with Vince Vaughn. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but they used the word Uzi, and my ears perked. And I was like, what does Uzi mean? Does it have a meaning? Apparently, it means machine gun. Did you know that?
Yes.
I
Um,
didn't know that.
I think it's a catchy name, a little pseudonym, but for the most part, oh, I was going to say, oh, that movie's older than me. So look at that.
Yeah. So, sorry, is this not your real name?
No,
Okay. I thought this was your real name all this time. All right.
that's why I find it very funny when you say it, but you know.
Yeah. Okay. Robert.
Here's for some optimism. It knows everything in Las Vegas. You just take a picture of it and send it to ChatGPT, and it'll tell you all about it. Games, odds, how they're using your own brain against you to addict you, all sorts of things.
Omar, do you think we're behind China?
On what?
Just Robert is, we're behind. We're gonna make a valiant effort, but they're ahead. Doom and gloom.
Behind on what?
What we're talking about,
AI?
right?
Robots,
Well, the
autonomous
US
vehicles.
is ahead of China in AI. The US is far better at semiconductors and chips. So this is really like the key enabler of AI is just like scaling up chips. So the best companies are in the US, although China is trying to catch up. I heard one estimate that they're 3 years behind TSMC. And so TSMC, Taiwan is a US partner. Although they're kind of within the Chinese sphere, China believes they own Taiwan. It's really kind of a US partner. And, the US has obviously historically been much better at chips. Then on the software side, we're also ahead of them. Now, maybe
Right,
in
but
the
Meta
future,
Meta says that if we get bogged down on these safety bills, China isn't going to worry about safety bills, so they're going to move ahead.
well, you might see, for example, people just move out of California and just go to Texas, for example, or
But
Nevada.
see, Robert was saying, we just talked about that too, and Robert was saying because all companies have major operations in California, this bill really impacts the nation, not just California.
Well, I mean, that's not really true. Not every business has presence in California. California historically has been the home of the tech industry. But if there were regulations that, for example, made it more difficult to do business in California, then absolutely you might see them locate elsewhere, even just nominally, and have their engineers there. So, like, I mean, the bill does seem kind of stupid, but there are things companies can do. They can move. The law can be changed over time. It can be revised. I don't even think it's been signed into law yet. There's a lot of room they have in sort of how they interpret it. I'm sure it's not going to be the end of the world, but you may see some companies decide not to locate in California because of it.
Meta Prime, are you convinced?
Am I convinced that we're going to be able to get ahead even with regulation? I mean, I'm I'm a big believer that one of the values the U.S. has is we are really, really good at being creative and innovative and breaking paradigms. And I think that, of the stuff that China's good at, I think that they're very good at, doing these things like shirking regulation and getting past that. But I also think they are not nearly as good as the creative end of this. This is why they end up trying to steal a bunch of our stuff, right? So I'm pretty optimistic that, if we don't limit ourselves too much, we can move forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some amount of Americans who, even if regulation does come down in California, right, they're going to take the initiative to go other places, and they're still going to want to be American companies. I think that the other thing too is like the military industrial complex is always really well incentivized to make sure that America is kind of on the cutting edge and in the lead. So I think that I find it hard to believe that we would ever fall behind, but I don't want to get complacent at the same time.
Robert.
Don't underestimate the Chinese. Yes, that they bootstrapped to where they are today, stealing our shit in a number of different ways. But today, you tour on a Chinese factory, it's way more advanced than anything I've seen in America. So, the people there are very smart, and they're going to AI school at a very high rate. I'm watching all the papers, and look at my AI list. I have 23,000 people in lists here on X. Many of them are Chinese. So if you're underestimating them, you're going to make a mistake strategically.
Uzi.
Now, we can't forget much of the manufacturing capacity China has, dwarfs America. So that software advantage does matter. I saw this maybe in May. I saw you just liked it. It looks like a General Dynamics dog to me. It's probably a different company, but they strapped a gun on it and they're putting it as a surveillance dog. I also heard in Ukraine, I don't know if it's America, but likely America is like given these similar human. I don't think they're humanoids, but I think they're more like dogs. And I think they're serving a different purpose in Ukraine, but there is a war application of the humanoid that we're not really talking about, but there's a potential that if China really wants to, they can manufacture, the parts at scale. They just don't really have the brain.
Okay, a few more comments on this. If you have a comment on this, please request to speak. Then we're going to switch to prompt engineering, and Michel is going to give us his tips and tricks. Crunch.
So keying on Robert's example at the top where he was having his wife teach the robot how to cook, I'm thinking there are lots of examples that robots could do that would inform what kind of regulations might be imposed upon them. For example, take a 90-year-old May Musk type lady, very artistic and elegant, who fell and broke both hips and needs help getting from the bed to the bathroom to the kitchen table, etc. And that could be used accelerated without controversy and be helped to guide how regulations are done. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic? Going once, going twice. Scott?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. All right, Michel, prompt engineering. So you've been at this for years and probably by far the most elaborate on the topic, most knowledgeable, experienced. What are the tips and tricks that you use that maybe say 3 or 5 of them that I can employ in my daily life to become more productive?
I mean, right now we have it easy. We can pay for OpenAI and have it create a GPT, but back then that was not a thing. So you would have a collection of like pre-prompt or some sort of like introduction you would give your LLM to get it started. A simple one would be act as a professional network engineer, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes, all right, I got this. And then you give it your problem. And that was the beginning era of prompt engineering, trying to tell the LLM you're working with to act as a particular role. Now, very early, I noticed the very insightful and efficient method of having two conversations side by side. And early in this journey at prompt engineering, I was referring to it as the teacher and the student, but I refined it to name them the workshop and the executioner. And giving that approach to your AI journey in what you're trying to do is literally you you give the job of prompt engineering to AI. So your workshop on the left side is going to be more messy, more brainstorming, and more trying to craft the perfect prompt so you can see the AI in action, trying to craft the perfect prompt that's going to be done in the executioner side. So I've built and shared with you, but everybody can build their own pre-prompts. You don't even have to make them GPTs. I have them as GPTs for particular work stuff because they're really tuned. But you can build, let's say, like a one-pager instruction set that tells each conversation, hey, you're acting as the workshop of a workshop and executioner duo, and your role is to help me brainstorm and build the most perfect prompt that's going to be given to this other AI. And then the other AI gets the other version of the text that says, hey, you're the executioner, you're going to receive this prompt from the workshop, and I want you to give me a concise output and some sort of postscriptum or like notes outside of the regular answer that's going to be relayed back to the workshop. And back and forward, I would copy paste stuff from the conversation on the left to the conversation on the right, and looking at how these two AIs essentially interact with each other, refine the quality of the prompt I would come up with.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, let me ask you something. So you have a workshop and an executioner, and you said they're different AIs, but are you using, let's say, ChatGPT for both?
For work, I created two GPTs, so their role and everything I don't have to define at each conversations.
I know,
But
but let's
you
say
can
just put
give this
yourself.
one-page text to Gemini
Mhm.
or whatever other LLMs, and it's prompted. Like it's the like these basics, like act as a professional, blah blah blah.
Okay, so basically you're saying I would have two open tabs of the same AI, say Gemini, and then tell
Mhm.
one of them you're the executioner, tell one of them you're the workshop. That's the way?
Yeah, and once you've done it pretty well, you can ask, because maybe you want to start a new conversation on a new subject. You can ask it, remove this particular subject we talked about, but give me like an instruction set that's generalized. And then you keep that piece of text and start a new conversation with it, both with the executioner and the workshop versions of these two tabs. Yeah.
Okay. What percent of your interactions with AI is on ChatGPT versus others?
I would say it used to be more than 90%, but I challenge myself now to use these tools that gives your prompt to several AIs. So like that makes the percentage that's submitted to Claude and Gemini a little bit bigger now, closer to 30%.
What tool do you use for that?
For work, we host one in-house, but there are a few out there. I don't have the bookmark right at my fingertips, but I can post as a comment to the space. They have like little split windows, and you type once and it submits to all of them. You run out of free tokens really fast because like they're paying the API on your dime, but then you can subscribe with that website and buy like their paid tokens. And then once you submit to 2 AIs, the cost is double. If you submit to 4 AI, the cost is like 4 times. And they spread it out and they run it through their API calls. Okay. Omar, do you use these tools?
Which tools?
You are not paying attention today. What's happening?
No, I was just reading X.
Yeah. Robert, do you use these tools?
Some of them, not enough of them, considering that there's 5,400 AI companies in my list. I think I use like 7 of them.
Really?
Yeah, I'm trying to use
5,400?
more. Yeah, and new ones coming. Like I just interviewed a entrepreneur this morning, has a new spreadsheet coming out on Wednesday, and it's mind blowing. All AI built, rebuilt with AI and for AI. It's like, whoa, things are about to get crazy, which is what
Yeah.
I like.
Michelle, any other tips and tricks before that? Uzi.
I want to give my rundown of what I use. I use Grok for real-time information, and my family likes Grok a lot, so that's pretty funny. They're sort of jealous that I have the Grok moat. I don't really use ChatGPT. I use Copilot to make images and Grok now for anything. But Copilot's how I made my profile picture, and you could do different renditionings. And then I just got access to Claude for work, so that's new. I've been using Copilot a lot for work too. So writing any code or any things for Power BI like DAX, that Copilot's really helpful. One thing I was supposed to use Claude for, I could have, or not could have, but I tried, was editing an Excel file that doesn't have that capability, but it is pretty competent. I'd say Claude, probably ChatGPT, the best one, and then Grok is budgeting there, but I wouldn't use it for work at this point.
Okay, but do you have any tips and tricks for prompt engineering?
Okay, so for images, that's where I focus a lot of my time on. I'd say this is particularly for Grok. The more specific you can get, the better. If you also have like an aesthetic theme, like for instance with Grok South Park, it could do it in that version. GTA, it could do it like that. And then getting down to the detail, that's the best prompt engineering that I have to offer.
Okay, so offer a theme and be as detailed as possible. Meta Prime?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting facts about prompt engineering that a lot of people don't know is if you put in a prompt that isn't very specific, that's very difficult for the image generation to software to work with. And so what ends up happening is it'll take your prompt and it'll send it through like another prompt generator, and then it will to create a much longer prompt. And so if you want to avoid, as Uzi's saying, like having something generate that isn't going to look very good or isn't going to be close to what you want, the more details, the better. The other thing that really helps me when I'm generating prompts is to get familiar with styles, similar to what Uzi was saying with South Park. Get familiar with what styles will generate the kind of images you like. And a lot of times you can say, oh, this famous artist, right? Like I like to do a lot of like Studio Ghibli like stuff. I think that's pretty cool. And so if you can figure out those styles and you can be pretty specific, and there's certain keywords. And so I highly recommend, if you're getting into image prompt engineering, like go to forums, see what other people are doing. I know the what is it? The Midjourney has like a Discord that's really good with people are constantly doing prompts in there, and so you can kind of use that as a way to get some inspiration. So, but there's a lot of really good ideas out there, but having that detail of what you really like, figuring out what you like, and having that detail is really important to being successful.
Uzi.
And I also wanted to add, once you have your image, with Runway, Kling, Luma, those are three image to video generators. So, it's really, I think you have to pay if you want more than a couple, and the duration of the video, you might have to pay for more. But I made a 10-second Tesla little ad, just, using my imagination, slap some music on there, and it's a whole production for 10 seconds.
Michelle.
I mean, image generation is a great example of what you would use to conversation for. I mean, when Grok image generation came out, I had one ChatGPT 4.0 conversation on one side and Grok on the other side. And then I would challenge my workshop, essentially was 4.0, trying to come up with an image generation prompt. And I gave it like, oh, you got to be explicitly asking for an image for it to trigger image generation in this other AI, blah, blah, blah. Make it short, about a paragraph or less, or 2 sentences, no more. And one of the challenges in any image generator, like I was trying to make an elephant on the moon, but I didn't want it to come up with an elephant spacesuit, but just like a naked elephant, like an elephant like that's naturally. But if you put in an image generation, oh, I want elephants not in a spacesuits. Guess what happens? You get elephants in a spacesuits because you said the word spacesuits. So I work on the workshop side of with ChatGPT, saying like, give me 3 examples, 5 examples of how we could word this. Like I exposed it to the challenge. Then with an omni model like ChatGPT 4.0, I could give it the image that Grok generated, and it say, how would you compare this image results from what the prompt we used, and how could we improve? So it literally really analyzed the results it created, or a few results, because you re-roll a lot in image generation. I recommend people do it digital like circle arrow to ask it to just do it again, do it again, do it again, and see what sticks. Because even with text, but more so with images, at least 2 or 3 attempts are the minimum amount you should do to fish a good result out of the bunch of results.
Thank you. Mishka.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say that it's a little bit, it's still on topic, but although I'm not like the most experienced to talk about all the AI amateur topics that we've had on the previous episodes, I did want to say that I am now officially taking a machine learning class at the University of Michigan. So very soon I'll be able to bring productive conversation to this group. So yeah.
Awesome. I mean, you can say a few words now. I'm sure you use AI in your daily life. First of all, which one do you use the most? And when you're prompting it, is there anything that you kind of keep in mind that you can share with us?
Yeah, I would definitely say I prompted like out of all the AIs that I use the most, it's definitely a Tesla FSD. Now besides that, it would have to be ChatGPT for like small prompts for my company, like for tutoring, to where I just have it like create a bunch of problem sets for like mathematics. But it's kind of at it, at least as of right now, like because the materials I generate tend to be like calculus or lower college math courses, which ChatGPT is just very inaccurate on that, to where I've probably reverted a lot to just rewriting from textbooks again, and I've been going away from using AI as of late. Um, but I think for a lot of text generation, it's incredible, and I think if you're like doing any sort of like papers, if you need any sort of research done, I definitely will say I actually use ChatGPT to find like sources. and like ask ChatGPT for like, hey, like, could you find a link that possibly like backs up this information or possibly, debunks this information? And I think that's been a lot more successful than Google has been, because I've definitely been seeing that Google results have been very leaning toward one side, to say the least. And it's like tends to be the side that you're not researching or trying to find counterpoints to.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Uzi.
I think Perplexity's providing links really helps with research. I mean, I don't do much anymore, but that's really helpful. Grok providing tweets that it derived the information from is another. The more source, like when we have these answer genies, we won't get the same answer even if you use the same prompt. So the sourcing is really helpful. I don't really use Gemini though.
Yeah. I mean, I actually use Gemini often, and I really like ChatGPT 4o. Those are probably the two main ones I use. Grok, I use when it's Tesla related stuff. I use it, but I tried Claude. I didn't really like it that much. Didn't find it useful. Trying to think what else. I think that's about it. Michelle?
I mean, the product OpenAI is rolling out faster than Voice is their web search product, and they've been doubling every week now for three or 4 weeks, and with every doubling, they're gonna get through everyone by this fall. And it's more of this Claude-like web search. Well, unfortunately, it uses Bing, but with the help of AI, there's a way to make Bing kind of relevant and useful. The two combined, where it's really doesn't get stuck so much on the keywords you use like Google does, but on the like what you're trying to search for, and it's able to search a little bit deeper than surface level regarding scientific papers and that kind of stuff.
Uzi.
I was under the impression Bing is a Microsoft company and they were working with Copilot. So I mean that's the first thing. Second thing is I've always not used Google. I used DuckDuckGo growing up. So I'll literally use anything else except for Gemini. Grok. One thing with that I wanted to mention is I use it to search the web somewhat, but also what people have been saying on X. So that it's way better than the actual search tool, which seems to be input output.
Omar, can you tell us a little bit about XAI's, how fast they brought up this GPU network, GPU cluster, and how they achieved it?
Well, it took about 120 days and might be the fastest time anyone's ever brought up a cluster of that scale. And they really achieved it through vertical integration. So typically when you have a model like GPT-4 being trained, OpenAI is a company, they're training the model. So they then go out to Microsoft. They tell Microsoft, hey, I want to rent servers from you hourly. And then Microsoft says, okay, great. You'll rent from us hourly. Then we're going to actually go out to NVIDIA and we're going to go buy the DGX servers from them. And so they call out to NVIDIA and they go, hey, we want to buy the servers from you. And of course, NVIDIA doesn't actually even make those themselves. They have another company that contracts them. So it's really like several levels deep, right? You're waiting for the Azure data center to build up the cluster so that you can rent them from Microsoft, versus they said, let's just buy the servers ourselves from NVIDIA, buy the building ourselves, raise $6 billion and just start plugging shit in and get this up. And if the speed of sort of bringing up these clusters and expanding these clusters. They say they're going to double the capacity again by adding 50,000 H200s. If the key determinant, because these models are all so similar, if the key determinant of progress is really going to be how fast you can scale up the training cluster, then that really needs to be the core competency of the organization, not just how to train the model themselves, but the entire industrial process of training. Just like you don't want to outsource your EV manufacturing to another company, you don't necessarily want to outsource the running of the data center to another company, because that is the whole thing, right? I mean, that data center company could just go and start training their own models, maybe, as many have. So it's a really kind of a key kind of hallmark of all Elon's businesses. He looks at this and he says, okay, what is the core thing here? It's really this. It's building this training data center to train these models. So we need to know how to do that. And I mean, the level of vertical integration, going down, editing the hardware, editing the software, looking at all these little details in the software, changing things, coming up with their own networking stack, how to cool the servers, all these things. That really is probably going to be um, the key to being successful and profitable. You look at OpenAI, and they're just losing boatloads of money. I think the information had an article. I forgot how many billion it was. Like maybe 5 to 7 billion or something like that. Maybe as much as 9 billion. There were like some different items, the loss, and then the loss after accounting for the revenue, because they do have about 3 billion in revenue. So I think maybe it was only a 6 billion loss after that. But the unit economics, the poor unit economics of the business, at the end of the day, come down to the high cost of training and inference.
Thank you. We have a question in the replies. Michelle, maybe you can answer this one. Miko asks, what's the best way to create AI video right now?
One of the two Chinese companies, Kling is one, and I forget what the other one is. I shared it earlier today or a bit ago. I have to
Uzi?
find-
I mean, first you have to get your image. So Grok, Midjourney is probably the best, but if you want something saucy, Grok. And then Kling I had an awful experience with, but I recommend Runway. And then if that doesn't work and you run out of prompts or questions you could ask, try Luma.
Michelle?
My joke answer is Sora, but unfortunately, you gotta refer to my bio for more details about Sora.
Man, we got so many different answers in 30 seconds. Miko in the audience is thinking, well, which am I gonna use? Nobody said the same one. You guys just rattled off like 5 of them. So which one's best?
There's 600 in my holodeck list here on X.
Oh my gosh. Omar, which one do you use? You have a Rolodex? It's
I don't
2024.
really use any of them. There is one that can take an image and make videos, but most of these models, like Google's Veo and OpenAI's Sora, still haven't been fully released. So we have some stuff that can kind of work off an existing image and extend it, but there isn't a ton out there, and I don't make a ton of AI videos. I'll maybe generate an image, but not video so much.
I feel like Sora came out such a long time ago. How is it not released yet?
Well, first off, the videos actually suck. So you see the demo, you go, wow, this is great. In reality, you type in some prompt and you get some output that makes literally no sense. So they don't want to embarrass themselves. Second of all, they need to make sure it doesn't generate anything that gets them in trouble. Like you can't say, hey, have a Minnie Mouse having a threesome with Goofy and Donald Duck. You know, that'll probably get you sued. So right now they're working on what they call red teaming, which means thinking about all the crazy shit you can think of. So before the other guy thinks of it, and seeing what happens, and then making adjustments. So that's part of it. The other part of it's just pricing and inference compute. I mean, it's going to be expensive to run these video generators, right? So you think about an image generator and the inference time needed, you can probably see it takes a little bit to load. So that's one image. A video needs 30 of those for 1 second of video. Plus, then you also need to generate audio. So it's harder, right? You're not seeing this as common yet, but it's going to become more common. As a matter of fact, I made $1,000 bet with Gary Marcus that by the end of the decade, someone would generate a successful film. Either critically, it wins an Oscar, or commercially, it's a major box office hit using just a prompt. And that would come a complete movie that people would actually like.
Yeah.
So,
You made it in the last episode in here, right?
this was like last week or something.
Yeah, in this episode, AI Amateurs episode 4 is when you made that $1,000 bet. I remember that conversation.
I'm not sure. I think it was like Adrian Space or something.
Oh, maybe I
At
don't know.
first, maybe I mentioned it a second time.
Okay.
But yeah, I think right now you can't really do anything like that. Like I haven't even really generated an AI video that looks good. So it's kind of a tall order. Maybe I'll lose the bet. But he said it's for charity, so whatever. But you just look at the way these training clusters are being built out, the way these models are advancing, it's probably inevitable that that will happen. And we're going to have you're never going to run out of anything to watch. You're going to be able to say, "Hey, I really liked that show. Can you make a show that's kind of like this, but more dragons? And I want Jonah Hill to be in it." And they're just like, "Sure." And they'll be like, "Oh, Inception." And you'll be like, "Oh, I hate Leonardo DiCaprio. Can you make it Matthew McConaughey instead?" And they'll be like, "Sure." And they just replace it. Now Matthew McConaughey is playing that role or whatever. So it's not even going to be like movies as we know it today. It could be interactive. Things could be generated in real time. They could have a horror movie and dynamically generated to look like your town to make it extra creepy, right? So, i- you know, the art itself is going to change. There's a really good book by the Talking Heads guy. It's called How Does Music Work? Everyone should read it. And he says, we think about artists as being inspired and like they just come up with this art and, put it out there, but they're very much fitting the mediums that they have, right? Before we recorded music, songs were primarily designed to be sung in public. Then once we had recordings, they were actually geared to the recording. He said, "You think all the songs just come out at 3 or 4 minutes? No, that's just the time, you know, for a vinyl record. That's kind of what made sense." So art itself is going to change a lot as the tools change. And it's going to be a very weird and different world. There will be endless amounts of music, movies, shows, books, anything you can think of.
Robert.
Edward Saatchi showed me his creation that won him, I think, an Oscar or something like that. It was a VR experience where I was put into this child's room, and this child was bouncing around the house around me, looking at her writings on the walls. And then she comes over to me and starts talking to me, looking at me, and hands me a flashlight in VR. I took that and it worked like a real flashlight in the experience. That's about what this is going to be in about 18 months.
Uzi.
I'm surprised Scoble didn't mention it because I learned this from him. But reading his newsletter, I think video games will certainly be part of what Omar was talking about. With you can customize your movie. I guess with story video games, usually they're based off like a character like Spider-Man. There's a finite point to it, And when you get to the point where you can generate like a continuation of the story, you might need to change the pricing model. It might need to be a subscription because it will be an endless game instead of usually a lot of games are annual releases or every couple of years to monetize.
Yeah, you're right. The game could go on forever. And essentially what you're going to see is game rendering engines replaced by machine learning models that produce through a generative process what you see on the screen. So this is going to unlock new levels of realism. Right now what we have is kind of like a lot of math, like okay, I'm drawing a bunch of polygons and like it's never going to look that realistic. A generative approach that's trained on real images will be able to generate a video game that looks photorealistic. It'll be freaky. And, kind of interesting, we used to have the GPUs for running the video game, and then now the same GPUs also run the model. So it's perfect. Any gamer will be able to run this game, assuming this, type of generative model is developed. It's kind of interesting when you talk about, they trained a model on Doom and it could generate the next frame of Doom. I mean, even the game's control code, potentially, they could figure out a way to just make it an end-to-end model. So it's definitely going to change games. It's definitely going to change pretty much all forms of art. The world is going to look very weird compared to today.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Michelle, anything else on your mind?
I mean, I want to point out the Doom thing, but Hallmark went all the way to it. It was kind of the craziest demo I've seen this week. The person would just press the up arrow and it would generate the next frame. And like Doom is such a well-known game that like it was able to spit it out right away. And this just like it's the baby step. When you can understand that this is the beginning, you understand where the end goal is going to look like.
If you're good at talking contextually to the engine, you're going to be a good prompt writer because it likes knowing your context. Where are you? What are you doing? What do you want done? Right? What's around the scene? What? Give it the context, and all of a sudden, it'll give you a much better answer.
Yeah, that was the first thing I told you in AI Amateur episode 1, I think. We closed with some prompt engineering comments, and my go-to was like, oh, structure your prompt and label what is context, what is a draft, or like what exactly you want the answer to look like, and what are like some instructions you want the AI to do. And once you separate those very clearly and use it extensively, it's just like every prompt should have 1 or 2 layers. Like in my worker and executioner model, I have the workshop send a query, and then it has some footnotes for the executioner, and the executioner is going to produce a result with additional footnotes or question it wants answered from the workshop. And just looking at two AI asking each other's questions makes you go deeper in what you were trying to execute with AI than if you would be sitting in front of the blinking cursor of a single conversation. Like it stops this. I find this method of bouncing from one conversation to another in general, it really develops. You're never left stuck because you're always having a laugh at the two AIs asking each other's questions. And it makes you go deeper and further into what you're trying to achieve.
Michelle, why do you need two separate tabs, two separate windows for this? Can't you just say you are now the workshop, now you are the executioner in the same conversation?
There used to be a very shallow context window. I mean, the early ChatGPT 3 context window was like 16,000 tokens. So you would write something similar to a book. The way I test a context window is like I ask an AI to come up with a choose your own adventure book type of story, and then after a paragraph or so, it asks me, do I want to turn left or right? Should the main character do this or that, or that kind of question? Then you go. It's more effective with voice conversation because it's makes you type faster, but um then you go and talk to it for 20-30 minutes, and then you ask, all right, give me a summary of the whole story so far, and then you would remember more of the story than it was able to spit back out to you. Now those context window are larger and larger. It's less of an issue. That was an issue in the earlier implementations of AI, but I like the executioner side to be very light on extra fluffy tokens. And then the workshop is where context might be lost even at some point on the workshop side, because there were so many, like I asked it to give me 5 versions of it and I picked the best one and I went this way and I tried something else. And then, all right, I got something I want to shoot to the executioner. And then the executioner side is right where I left off the last time I sent something to the executioner, without all of that back and forward and give me 5 versions and let's pick this one, but merge and this and change that. It makes for a more cleaner conversation on the executioner side.
Okay, thank you, man. It's really impressive how much thought you put into this. Really amazing. I mean, we can do this like Michelle's Corner. Every Monday, you can maybe take 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you need, to give us tips and tricks about prompt engineering.
Or gives me specific goals to achieve, because that's what I've done when I teach it to kids at the library. They came up with stuff and we went their direction with the elephant on the moon stuff and whatever they wanted to draw, or their goal. I think your goal was to have this like summarization of your daily Tesla spaces. So like we're talking 2-3 hours of spoken context summarized, so like you can refine the workshop and executioner to achieve different roles in this like summarization of a space type of thing. I mean, you would set up the workshop would more be akin to some sort of pipeline, that you have like raw inputs that might contain all of the timestamps and the fluff. And when summarizing meetings, I would try to have a first layer of AI take the transcript and then just clean it out of the like, how you doing, how's the weather. I just want whatever was like what was relevant being talked about, and without the extra can you hear me, and these
Yeah,
things.
the thing is though, so I actually tried different chatbots when I was summarizing the TSL Live on Friday. And ChatGPT and Grok and a couple others, they asked me to separate it in different sections and then feed it to them one after another, where Gemini could take the entire thing. And when Gemini did that with one prompt, a very simple prompt, make some bullet points summary for my patrons of this YouTube Live about Tesla. And Gemini sped it out. There was no irrelevant point added to the summary. Nothing about how are you, how is your day going, how is your weekend, kind of stuff that we have sometimes in TSL Live. It was all very relevant and material, great summary that it produced in one shot. What do you make of that?
I mean, that's where Gemini shines in its ability, not only like measuring the size of the context window, but like how many tokens, but it's really more versatile and effective at what you're trying to do, where there is lots of important information in your transcript, and making a summary of it is not just like skimming or reading diagonally really fast. It's really, you got to understand what was talked about in length, and the back and forward question and answer that happened about that subject, and then trying to summarize that effectively. That's where Gemini might shine even more. But if you take the whatever file format of a transcription text and dump it into a 1 or 2 sentence prompt to ChatGPT, and here's the raw file, it's gonna do maybe 3 on 10 jobs, when the same amount of effort with Gemini is gonna go further, and the quality of the results gonna be much better. But if you take the time to craft something really good that OpenAI would be able to work with, it's several more steps, 20 minutes instead of 5 maybe, but then the result might be similar or better.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the time savings any day of the week, twice on Sundays. I'd rather do it in a few minutes and get it to 99% as opposed to worry about that 100 percentile perfection for another 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. Uzi.
I wanted to ask about XTV and if anyone was able to get it, if there's Grok in there.
No, I haven't. I've been playing with it for the last half an hour. No, the search really sucks.
All right. Uzi?
Is it just on Fire TVs? So I might have to get one.
I have a Sony TV that's run by Google, so it loaded up on my Google TV.
Uzi is a X fanatic, right, Uzi?
That's true. I've only had X. I've never been on Twitter, and I've only been on this platform for a little bit over a year. I mean, this profile, I had like a trial run, and then I went for it with this one, maybe like September. No, a little late November.
And I
Why
was
don't
the
you
first
apply for a
person to
job
have
there?
1,000 followers on Twitter.com back 17 years ago.
Uzi, why don't you apply for a job at X?
I already have a job. I probably am not helpful on the engineering side.
Okay. I'm going to summarize this space as well tomorrow morning and send it to patrons. Patrons also get daily summaries of Tesla Live spaces. So instead of having to sit through a 2-hour recording, you can just read 5 to 10 bullet points and basically get 95% of the material information that we discuss. And I'm going to do the same for AI amateur spaces for patrons as well. Now that we're using AI tools to 100x the productivity of creating these summaries. Thank you, Michelle, for all your help on that front. All right, on that note, thank you very much, everybody, and I will chat with you all tomorrow in Tesla Live. Take care. Good night.